just went through the Vinegar Syndrome release of Monsters and Madness Volume 2, Larry Fessenden films. It has Wendigo and The Last Winter on here. I'm just going to review them together because they have a lot in common. They're both very wintry in the way they look. They both have Wendigo aspects to them. I think I like Wendigo more, and I've actually heard a lot of people say that that might be Fessenden's best film in general. It is good. It's typical Fessenden. If you're not familiar with his films, they're usually very slow paced. Seem to be a lot longer than they typically should end up being, but there's a lot of meaning. There's a lot of, subtext to the films. So it's usually very much, and I know he said this before, it's kind of like there's two things going on. There's a straightforward story going on, and then there's like more societal type stuff happening with the film, which ends up being the subtext, which is what he's really getting to. And a lot of the times, if you're picking up on that or you're dissecting it to pull that out of it, it's very meaningful stuff. And that does happen with both of these films, actually. I'd say more so Wendigo than The Last Winter. The Last Winter is kind of more of like an eco-horror type deal. Feels a lot like the movie The Thing, where there's a lot of paranoia, people who are isolated in a very wintry setting. And there's deaths and, ends up being kind of about climate change type stuff. And Wendigo is more about, a family situation through the eyes of a young child, played by Eric Sullivan, who I mainly know from The Youngest Child and Malcolm in the Middle, which is a great show. But that one has a lot more kind of heart to it, and it's just more interesting because everything's through the perspective of a child, and it's kind of a lot of questions of like what's actually going on here. Is it the events that you're seeing, or does this have to do with the imagination of the child? And then kind of like trauma. And yeah, so pretty good films in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I like both the films. I don't love both of them, but that part of that is I'm not a huge fan of the pacing of Fessenden's films. I think they're usually pretty bloated. But it's a preference thing. I would give both the films, well, okay, so I'd give Wendigo a 3.5 stars. I'd give The Last Winter a 3-star. But as a release, I would give this 3.5 stars straight up, because there's also some good essays in here. But anyway, yeah, check this one out if it sounds interesting to you, especially if you're a Fessenden fan. If you like Fessenden films, these are kind of must-owns in my opinion. But have a great day.